All right. Welcome, everyone. Constitution Study Group. The Sunday before the 2020 election. There may be some rowdiness going on because some people will have things to say about the election, but I will allow that to occur, but I won't take sides. I deal with governance, not with politics.
Who do you think you are, Switzerland or something?
I have been accused of that, yes.
It was a compliment, actually.
Thank you. So, all right. We usually spend an amount of time on a review. However, everyone that's here has already, I'm going to admit a new person here, already has been with me through this whole thing and heard the review a number of times. So anyone who is watching this on video, the review is to go to the previous meeting that we had, and there's a pretty complete review in that one. So that is the review. Everybody okay with that one?
Yep.
Sure.
All right. All right. So now we're going to get into the amendments, or we're going to continue with the amendments, and we're going to pick up. We had just finished the Civil War. We had just finished the what are called the Reconstruction Amendments. And I'm going to try to share my screen. And let me hang on here with this. Here we go. And this is the title page of study guide, and we're going to. Boy, look at this review. We are really just going through this review here. Phew, boy, wow. And we are down to the progressive amendments. And I think that what we're going to do is let's start from here. And Teresa, I don't usually like to read my words. I just want to read what the Constitution says, but this is a lead into it because there's a reason these amendments were put together and stuff. Okay. So let's just do these couple of paragraphs here. Teresa, would you like to do the first one?
Sure. Starting with it seemed.
Yeah.
Okay. It seemed nothing could. Excuse me. It seemed nothing could be done about many things. During the same period following the Civil War, a number of powerful forces were transforming American society. The industrial age was coming into full swing in America. Competition was fierce until big moneyed interests induced government officials to grant them special monopolies. The most notable monopolies went to railroads and the banks that backed them.
All right. Marty, you want to do the next paragraph?
The last half of the 1800s saw small businesses and farmers squeezed between privately owned but government subsidized railroads and freewheeling special interest banks. Small businesses and the little guy were unable to compete with big business, backed by government corruption. The only place a person could go for freedom was west. Outlaw Jesse James was a folk hero in the 1880s because he only robbed from banks and railroads. Common folk protected him, and by 1890, common folk all across the country wanted freedom, even if it meant someone else was squeezed.
All right. Joel, you want to do that? You want to do the last two there?
Yeah, sure. Minorities were squeezed. For 3 decades, from 1890 to 1920, saw the worst treatment of blacks before or since. Jim Crow laws, separate but equal, to 1992. And people wanted to squeeze big business. It was vaguely recognized that big business and its corrupting hold over government was the source of their problems. By 1900, a number of progressive ideas were being proposed to bring the government back to the people.
Good.
Hmm.
So that is the backdrop in which these next amendments were adopted. And so we will just, I don't think we need to go through this whole thing here, the whole thing of what this is, what each of them, and we're just gonna go ahead and read them. Okay, so let's see who's on the list here. Christian,
Howard?
you want to read the 16th Amendment?
Who's reading?
Christian? Christian,
I was on
Christian,
mute. Here I am.
you're muted. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go,
Right.
Christian.
The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derives without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census of enumeration.
Good. All right, and that harkens back to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. Howard, you have a lot of noise, ambient noise in the background there.
I'll stop. I'm looking through your book to see where those pages are that you read from. And I don't seem to have the same information on page 77. I got something.
This is page
71.
71. It was page 71.
Oh, okay. Well, then that might explain it.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Anyway, I'll stop looking for it.
Okay. All right. So what this does is it changes, this language here about apportionment among the several states in regard to census of enumeration has to do with Article 1, Section 2, in which representation and direct taxes are to be apportioned among the several states and depending upon a census. At this point, what we need to know is what is a direct tax and what other kind of tax is there? Go ahead.
My answer. Oh, okay. Direct tax is the IRS comes to you and wants your money.
That's not correct.
Okay. And the other one, the indirect tax, is the government gets its money from the states who have to pay based upon the population that shows up in the census. Is that
Okay,
possibly true?
that's a nice stab, Howard. That's a nice
Okay.
stab. I like that stab. Okay.
I'm losing a lot of blood here, stabbing.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to show you a book. Can you see this book here?
Something good
Bring it over
Yeah.
again.
for
good
good
and
and
evil.
evil.
The Impact of Taxes on the Course of Government by Charles Adams.
Course of civilization.
Okay. This is kind of a history of taxation. And in it, he describes that there are two types of taxes. And it just so happens that this one, I got this, I think, I'm not sure if it was the fair tax people that were promoting that book, and so I got it, or if it was the precursor to the fair tax people, which was the Citizens for an Alternative Tax System, CATS. But I used to train CATS members on the Constitution. It was very interesting. Very interesting. In fact, one of the CATS chapter leaders was a fellow that started calling me Mr. Constitution. So So they had the idea. They were the precursor, and they turned into the fair tax people, the fair tax group.
Okay, is fair tax a sales tax?
Yeah,
Federal sales tax?
that's the national sales tax. Yes,
Okay, and what was the name of that book again? Good and Evil: The Impact of
it's
Taxes?
it's For Good and Evil, and it's by Charles Adams. And I think you can just go look it up on Amazon or something.
Yeah, well,
Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the difference between direct and indirect taxes. Because and in this book it has a real good history of income taxes, which I'm also going to go over here as well. But the reason that at the beginning they talked about direct taxes in Article 1, Section 2, is because the only taxation that happened under the Articles of Confederation was a direct tax. And the direct tax is a tax in which a person is taxed directly because of who he is. It could also be called a poll tax. It could also be called, we could do a direct tax here. If I said, everyone who comes to this meeting has to pay me $5. That's a direct tax. Howard, you're making a lot of noise again.
Yeah, the noise.
I'm stopping.
Thank you. Are you able to mute yourself, Howard?
Yeah, but when I've done that, then I lose the audio. I can't get back on.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. Then just be very quiet, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So so a direct tax is a tax that is directly on a person. You are taxed because you exist. You are taxed because you are Joel Morris, so you pay me $5. So everybody that's here has to pay me $5. That's a direct tax. However, it also goes to property as well. And that's why, for instance, I shouldn't say that's why, but property taxes, you own a house or you own a business in a state, in a county, and you have to pay property taxes to the county. That's a direct tax. It's a direct tax on you and your property. You didn't necessarily do anything with the property. It exists, it sits there, and therefore you are taxed on it. That's a direct tax. So they said any direct taxes has to be done by apportioning the people. In other words, what they were doing was getting away from trying to do a direct tax on, for instance, they had a direct tax in England back around 1550s or something like that, called the window tax. And they would go around, and I read about that in this For Good or Evil. They would go around and count the number of windows in your house, and then they would tax you based on, however many pence or however many shillings for each window that's in your house. So any kind of property tax, any kind of poll tax of just counting heads is a direct tax. And those have to be done according to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2. Those have to be done. They have to be apportioned amongst the several states, and they have to be with regard to a census or enumeration. Income taxes, I'll just very briefly do a history of income taxes here. The earliest kind of modern income tax was in England about the year 1800, when they had to beat Napoleon. They had to raise a whole lot of money real fast. And the quickest way to do that was an income tax. And it did. It raised a whole bunch of money so that they could put an army in the field and they could beat Napoleon. And that's what they did. And as soon as it was over, then they got rid of the income tax. And according to For Good and Evil, That's one of the reasons that the British Empire expanded so much in the 1800s, was because the taxation went low because they got rid of this income tax. But for that short period, for that immediate need, they needed a whole bunch of money real fast, and so they had an income tax. Then in the Civil War, Lincoln needed a whole bunch of money real fast. So he imposed an income tax. And it was challenged at that time because if you made income from your property, then it was as though it was taxing the property, which would make it then a direct tax. So, but before, that went to court, but before it could get out of court, before it actually got moving in court, the income tax was rescinded. The whole thing was moot. So there was no ruling on it. There was nothing about it. It went away. Then in the 1880s, and Christian is going to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but in the 1880s, they decided to have another income tax. They had another income tax, which did also include income on property, or income from property. That was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, if you're going to tax, you're taxing property. So that is a direct tax, and so it's unconstitutional. You can't have an income tax, at least not on property. So it became unconstitutional. So the progressives, which also included the communists, because that's the first plank of the Communist Manifesto, is to have an income tax, progressive income tax.
A heavy and progressive tax.
I'm sorry?
A heavy and progressive tax.
Right. And that got, so that was, so they got this passed. Now, all that this does, and Christian will be quick to point out, that it does not have an enabling clause. Like, for instance, here when we go back to Amendment 15, it says, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article with appropriate legislation. It's a new power. So since 16 doesn't have that, this is not a new power that is granted to Congress. All it is a redefinition. It's saying that an income tax is not a direct tax. That's all it's saying. Now, Congress does have the power to collect indirect taxes. That's in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and so on and so forth. And those are all indirect taxes. And the difference between a direct tax, which is on you, and an indirect tax is that they're taxing the transaction. You don't have to make that transaction. So you don't have to pay that tax unless you make the transaction. So it is a tax, of course, you have to pay it, but it's not directly to you. It is indirectly to you because it is a tax on the transaction. Does that make sense? So
Yes. All
all that they have done here is said that the income from whatever source derived is an indirect tax. It's not a direct tax. All this is a redefinition of what income means. That's just the redefinition of it, and that's all it did. Now, Christian, I know, probably has a number of things he'd like to say about this. Christian?
Yes. Well, the only thing I'd say is the Supreme Court ruled on it probably 30 times, and the federal appellate courts have ruled on it as recently as, I think, 2002. The District the Circuit Court for the District of Columbia went into it, and the word income has a specialized meaning. It's not your colloquial word income, as in the dictionary. So there's a lot to be said about it. It's a bit confusing because the amendment itself has so much push behind it to make it mean something else. But the reason that it doesn't have an enabling clause is because, as the Supreme Court said, it was not the purpose or effect of that amendment to bring any new subject within the taxing power. So that's why it doesn't have an enabling clause.
Okay.
That was,
And you see, when I look at it, I say the reason it doesn't have an enabling clause is because all it does is change the definition of income, of a tax on income, from being a direct to an indirect tax. And that does not require an enabling clause either. It's just making a definition. Now, I do know from what you from our back and forth, Christian, the problem, or I don't want to say the problem you have with it, but the objection is that income, according to you, from what you read of the Supreme Court decisions, has to be a particular type of income, or it has to have an exact definition. Now, within 25 words or less, can you say what that is, why it's different than what we usually consider to be income?
Well, when the Supreme Court says it was not the purpose to effect a change to bring any new power to Congress to tax, it means the income still has to remain either an excise, a duty, or an impost. So an excise is a privilege. So let me clarify it more. In Bowers versus Kerbaugh Empire, 1926, they said income has been taken to mean the same thing as used in the corporation excise tax of 1909.
And what is that?
The corporation excise tax was a tax on corporations.
No, not what is that? What is the definition of income in that?
It was a tax on the profits and gains of corporations.
Of a corporation.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying is that this actually only affects corporations. It does not affect you and I as natural persons.
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
for the most part. Remember that there's a famous case called Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust, and Farmers Loan and Trust made Congress's Tax Act, voided it, and it was basically a tariff act in 1894, I believe, and that was the most extensive piece that the Supreme Court had ever done on the taxing clauses of the Constitution. It's quite long. It's quite in depth. It goes into quite a bit of detail on it.
Okay.
So that was it. And then in 1909, they put
Okay.
in.
Now this is all before 1913.
Yes.
All right. So it may be that the 16th Amendment changed those, has some kind of effect on those.
Yeah. Well, they explain why. The Supreme Court goes into detail why the 16th Amendment existed in Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad.
Okay. All I know is that I looked. I mean, what I did, because I knew we were going to talk about this, is I looked at the statutory definition of income, and the statutory definition of income is at 26 USC section 61, and it includes compensation for all kinds of services. It's got 14 different items. It's got all kinds of stuff. And I'm not, see, here's, okay, so this, the definition of income is a point of controversy about this. And I'm just going to lay that aside. I'm going to say that's a point of controversy.
Yeah.
We're not going to litigate it here.
Right.
But I also have, I have a whole library here of, here's this book, here's this book, here's this book. You know something is wrong when it's wrong, you know, and so on. Here's another one, the vulture in eagle's clothing. Here's another one, the law that never was. The whole pile of these things, which attack the 16th Amendment on various different theories.
Yes.
That it's, you know, it never was properly ratified. That's what this law that never was about.
Right.
Inside the United States Code, it is the United States is defined as only the territories and not the states themselves, which there are places where it does do that. That's correct. And that's what this vulture in eagle's clothing is about. There are a number of controversies and theories about how to deal about sort of how you could get out, how you could avoid taxes. And I have heard of people who former IRS agents who have done the correct paperwork so that they no longer have to pay income taxes at all. And I'm not sure what that is. And but I've known a number of people that have done that. Because I've been looking at this since 1975 or so. And I've known a number of people who have done this, who have gotten away with it, who have done various things with it and so on. And about 1980, 1985, I made a decision. And I said, you know, I probably could figure out how to legally and properly go to court with this and win. I could probably figure out how to do that, but I would spend the rest of my life making this my career. And I had to decide whether I wanted to make fighting the tax code my career or not. And I decided that I'd rather not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, if someone wants to do it, there are all kinds of, you know, the best defense that I really like was from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said, if a law cannot be understood by a reasonably intelligent person for him to know what it is he should do or should not do, it's not really a law at all.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
if you take somebody's tax data and you give it to 16 different tax preparers, including some from the IRS, everyone's going to come up with a different answer.
Right.
And Kevin can probably attest to that, because Kevin is a tax guy. That's what
The
he
joke
does.
is you can call the IRS and ask 10 different people the same question and get 10 different responses.
That's
And
right.
sometimes you get a different response from the same person. I could go on and on. I mean, people get the publications and they read them, designed to help people do their taxes. On the very first page, on the insert of PEP 17, their main pub, it says that the IRS is not bound by this publication. Basically, it's for entertainment purposes. I mean, it's a joke.
So I mean, if I were actually going to really go at it, I would not go at it on whether or not it's income. I would not go at it as whether or not the United States has jurisdiction. I would not go at it on anything other than it's not really a law, because a reasonably intelligent person cannot look at it and determine what he should or should not do. That's what I would do if I wanted to make a career out of it.
Yeah, that's called void for vagueness rule.
And
That's
and
right.
John, if I may interject one more thing,
The law become,
The joke in the tax industry is that you can do it. You can get away without paying taxes. And the second you write a book and start teaching other people how to do it, you find yourself in a jail, a federal
world of hurt.
jail somewhere. That's
Well-
where they draw the line.
Just ask Ira Schiff.
Yeah, yeah. I heard an argument one time from a group called Freeman's Group.
Yeah.
They were making the point that wages is not the same as income, and income is like money from investments,
I know.
stocks.
Yeah, that's very much like what Christian was talking about. And in fact, as I said, we could spend hours on this and all of the different ways that theories that have come up and theories that have been worked on, theories that and theories that somebody has managed to get the courts to agree with them. But then you have to decide if you're going to make a career out of it. So, with
I have a friend who has actually done that and has paid no taxes for, I don't know, 40 years.
good. All he has to do is write a book and he'll be in trouble.
yeah, exactly.
All right. So I am going to end this one. We've been on it now for almost a half an hour.
Teresa's got her hand up.
Oh, Teresa,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I have a question from the very beginning. What, it may sound so, what's an enabling clause?
Oh, an enabling clause is this one here. You're looking at the screen there.
Yeah.
Here we have 15, and here it says blah, 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 blah. And then it says Congress has the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.
Oh, okay.
We are going to, this is a new power. This is something you can do
Okay.
that you couldn't do before.
Okay.
16 starts out with, what does 16 start out with? It says the Congress shall have the power. That's not enabling?
No, all it's doing is what that's doing is it's redefining a tax on income as being direct, as being indirect instead of direct.
The Congress already had that power.
Yeah, it just, but that power is laid to that, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to,
Hmm.
and, okay, last chance, anyone want to say anything about 16 and make it very quick because we're going to move on?
Get rid of it. Go ahead.
There is a book by Murray Rothbard called The Progressive Era that goes into great detail about the progressive movement of the 1880s through the 1920s.
Yep.
A lot of the impetus for these three amendments came from Women's Temperance Union, and it was as a group of women moving to change things for the better because men are such dolts and fools, apparently. So I point that out. Good book. Got to read it.
Okay, thank you. Christian, any last word?
No, I think that's we should move on to the 17th.
Okay, very good. Moving on to 17, I don't even know whose turn it is to read.
Howard?
Howard's.
Howard,
Hey. Kristen, you want to go?
Sure.
Oh, you read.
No, I already read, but you want me to read again? Go ahead. You ready?
Yeah.
The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof, for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. The electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislatures.
good. So what this has done now is it has changed Article 1, Section 3, so that instead of having the state legislatures appoint the senators, it's now a popular vote, which makes them just sort of a super size of the House of Representatives.
Redundancy.
Yes, it's a bit of a redundancy. Now, the reason for this is there have been a couple of reasons for it. One is that it has is that a lot of Senate seats were being bought, and Oregon was particularly bad about it. So that there would be a lot of bribery, and that's how senators got their seats, is because they bribed the state legislature to appoint them. And the second one is that sometimes the legislature could not decide on who to send to the Senate, and so the state would not have a representative in the Senate, and that was a bit of a problem. And finally, and I think that this is the progressive part of it, was that it was felt that the legislatures are kind of it's a political machine. So the senators are then selected by the political machine rather than the people, and they wanted to have this. They want to give it back to the people, and all of these progressive amendments are meant to, quote, democratize the government, to give it back to the people. For instance, on Amendment 16, the big argument for it to make it to get it to pass on Amendment 16 was, well, if the people are making payments to the government, then they're in charge of it.
Yeah, right.
Yes, right. Well, and that was actually the big argument. Great book about great book on the history of the American people. It's the Oxford History of the American People by Morrison, and it has this whole section is very nicely done in that. What it also does, however, is it used to be that there was only a few people who elected who the senator was. The senator was responsible to the legislature, so he had to represent the power of the government, or the powers of the state government. So he was then the voice of the states in the national legislature.
Which is what they're supposed to be, right?
And that's the way it's supposed to be. However, with this, when you turn it over to the people, he's no longer representing the legislature. He's representing the people of the state, which is not the government of the state. It's not. And what it did is, there's a term called federalism. And federalism is the relationship of the national government to the state governments. And there's supposed to be a kind of a balance there, so that if the state governments start destroying people's civil rights, the national government can come in and put them in line, which is like what they did in the South against the blacks, and what a lot of people think they should be doing in Portland these days too. But on the other hand, also you have the states. In order for any law to be passed at the national level, kind of the states have to give their consent to it, and that was to be done through the Senate, where the state governments have a voice in what that law is going to be. However, with this change, you have now removed the states from the equation, so that it creates an out of balance situation in federalism. The states are not as powerful against the national government as they were before. And also, I think in the last meeting, I talked a little bit about expanding the political population in order to change an existing power structure, and that's exactly what this does. It expands the political population of how senators get selected, and that is going to tear apart and take apart the existing power structure. And a lot of people think that's a good idea because, oh, it's those horrible political machines. There's these 50 political machines, one in each state. And what we've traded it in for is one political machine that makes that changes votes nationally by the mass media and Google and all the rest of that. So that's my thought on that. Anybody have anything to add to that or say anything or counter or?
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, what's going on? The middle of it where it says the electors in each state shall
Yeah,
have the call.
That's the people, that's the people who vote for the senators.
Okay, so let me read that again then, because I'm thinking the electors, what the heck? The elect,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
like,
Yeah, it's the people,
so I-
it's the people who vote for them. So the elector, so what it's doing is defining who gets to vote for the senator in the state.
okay, so it's
Electoral
like,
college. Think
No,
electoral
no,
college.
it's not, no. The electoral college has to do with the presidency.
Oh,
right, that was my why I
Yeah.
got confused.
Right. Well, an elector of anything is somebody who votes for something.
So
So
the,
if you and
so,
I, if the people in this meeting want to decide to, I don't know, to adjourn or throw me out, I don't know, whatever. Then each of you would be electors voting in that election.
right, okay, well, could we just go to my subjective reality?
Yeah.
Per what you said, I would be an elector in Florida.
You are an elector in Florida.
Okay, so so me, an elector in each state in the state of Florida, shall have the qualifications requisite for electors,
Of the most,
same definition
yes,
of the most numerous branch of the state legislatures.
sure. For you, and in Florida, you have two branches of the legislature, right? You
Right,
have- I don't know what they are. What do you call them? The Senate and
Senate and House. Senate and
Yeah.
House.
Senate and the House?
Yeah.
Oh, so which one of those has more members than the other?
I'm not really sure, I'm
The
sort of,
House.
I'm assuming it's the House.
Yes, right. So the House is the most numerous branch. So-
Right, okay,
So if you are qualified to vote for your representative in your state house, then you are qualified to vote for the US Senator also.
okay, thank you.
That's
Yeah,
what it says.
yeah, I had crossed up with the electoral college thing and I kept, you
Right,
know,
right,
you know, so-
Different.
right. But an elector is someone who votes.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right. And I don't know who's reading.
Howard,
Howard's reading. Okay.
when vacancies happen in the representation of any state in the Senate, the executive authority of such state shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies, provided that the legislature of any state may empower the executive thereof to make temporary appointments until the people fill the vacancies by election as the legislature may direct.
Good. So,
This,
yeah, go ahead.
read the last paragraph.
No. I just,
Right. Stopping.
I want to make sure that this is, that we've got what this is. It's just taking care of if there's vacancies.
Yeah.
yeah,
And if there is, the governor says, oh, we got to have an election. He issues a writ of election.
mhm.
Unless the legislature of the state has said, you know, why don't you just appoint somebody until we can have a regular election, and then we'll do that. So they can do that, and sometimes some states do, I think. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right. And
Finish off.
go ahead, Howard.
The amendment shall not be so construed as to affect the election or term of any senator chosen before it becomes valid as part of the Constitution.
Good. So any senator that's there remains there. This is just sort of the transition clause while you get into it. All right, now I view this as something that reduced the power of the states and increased the power of the national government. And that is something that, that's what 16 does as well. Is it increases the power of the national government because it allows them to reach into your pocket, your income, and
Mhm.
look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so the progressive amendments here, as I view it, are aimed at increasing the central power of government, and that therefore that seems to be that maybe that's kind of what progressives want to do.
Yeah.
That seems to be
Um,
their desire.
Not all progressives are fascists, but all fascists are progressives.
yeah, yeah.
And just for that, Kevin, you get to read next.
Well, I would like to make a point on Amendment 16 uh,
Very quick, Howard.
very quickly. It also, by taxing people at the lower levels of income, make it harder for them to accumulate capital and become rich. So it favors the rich who
Mm.
have armies of accountants and lawyers and so on. So it makes it harder for people to rise in the society. So it cuts down on the competition to become a plutocracy ruled by the rich.
Which also means that it cuts down on the middle class, and makes it more difficult for people to achieve and maintain the middle class, which is exactly what the communists want.
Totally agree. Thank you.
Okay,
God.
Kevin, you get to do 18, at least section 1.
After 1 year from the ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the importation thereof unto, or the exportation thereof from, the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof for beverage purposes is hereby prohibited.
Prohibition.
Yeah.
And that was in 1919 was when Prohibition started. This is the Women's Christian Temperance Union that Howard was talking about. And this is a huge, um, certainly makes the national government much more powerful.
Yeah.
Which is why it would be now, also, I've heard an interesting theory. Well, first of all, I'm actually, anybody have any comments about this one? You want to say anything about it?
It was repealed.
Yes, it was. It was a step too far. That's absolutely correct. I also, well, no, I won't go into that. I also heard that Rockefeller had a hand in this. And the reason for that, oh, Kevin, you're smiling. Do you know the story?
What about the Kennedys?
Oh, do you know the story?
What about
I
the
was thinking of
Rockefeller?
Joseph Kennedy. The only reason why we know who John F. Kennedy was didn't Joseph Kennedy work with the rum runners and
Absolutely. That's right. He was a prohibition buster. That's exactly right.
So, what's the story about Rockefeller?
Yeah, the Rockefellers, they made their money in oil fields and oil and stuff like that. But the way they made their the product that they had to sell was kerosene for lighting purposes. And they also had this highly flammable byproduct when you made kerosene that they called gasoline because it was so explosive. I mean, it was just like it would vaporize, turn into a gas so fast. So in about 1900 or so, as the rest of the world started being electrified and the electric light was coming, people stopped buying kerosene. he had to find new outlets for his products. One of the ones that he found was pharmaceuticals, because that's where pharmaceuticals come from. It's petroleum that's been, because it's a hydrocarbon, and it's highly malleable, and you can turn it into all kinds of all kinds of potions and notions and stuff like that. So he went into pharmaceuticals, and the second one was that he saw this. He had gasoline, and he was using gasoline in his engines, in his in his in his engines, in his own factories and stuff. And he saw that here's this automobile, it's coming out, and it's starting to catch on. And wouldn't it be great if they all ran on gasoline? That would be a huge market. However, all the farmers were taking, they had corn and grain and so on, and they made alcohol out of it to use, not necessarily to drink, but also to drink, of course. And they but they could use it in their engines, and start
Yeah.
having their start using their grain alcohol as a fuel for their cars. And that he had a hand in getting this passed to completely squelch the making of other kinds of fuels that cars could run on. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but I think it's kind of a cool story.
John, I just finished reading or listening to Titan, which was about John D. Rockefeller.
Uh-huh.
And he was also a very, very strict
Baptist.
guy who did not drink, hated it, tried to prohibit it for everybody he knew too.
Right.
So it was a personal, religious thing for him too. Very much involved in that.
All right. Section
And his wife
2.
especially was.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Section 2. I don't know. Joel, you want to read?
Section 3.
Section 2.
Section 2. Joel?
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Joel.
There we go.
Yep.
The Congress and the several states shall have concurrent power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.
Which means the states can pass their own laws having to do with this, and Congress can pass their own laws having to do with this.
Well, that's good. That's what it should be.
Yeah, I agree.
The reason being is because
Maybe yes, maybe no, but we'll get into that a little later, because there are some things that really belong to Congress, and there's other things that really belong to the states.
like interstate commerce is a Congress power. So Congress had to force it through one of their powers, which is interstate commerce.
Uh-huh.
So the importation and exportation of alcohol had to be, so they had to write legislation regarding that.
Right.
And then the states had to write legislation for intrastate commerce, because
Right.
intrastate is still within a power of the state.
Right. So anyway, they had to make it concurrent. And then section 3, Joel? And again, you're muted. There you go.
This article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by the legislatures of the several states as provided in the Constitution within 7 years from the date of the submission hereof to the states by the Congress.
Okay, so first of all, it has to be done by the legislatures of the states. It's not going to be done by a convention. It has to be done by legislatures of the states. And secondly, it's a 7-year time limit. Can anyone think of a reason why did you want to have a time limit on this?
So that it would expire if Congress didn't act within a reasonable period of time.
No, it's not Congress. This is now out to the states.
Okay. Again, a reasonable period of time for the states to act.
Right.
Or not.
And I would say so that they didn't just draw it out, and then
Right.
50 years
Yep.
later, we get enough states to
Right.
agree to it or something. It's,
An
it's like,
end cycle.
it's like, we're either going to do this or we're not going to do this.
And maybe
Right.
it was also because there were people on both sides going yes and no, and maybe they knew that they had a limited time to get this thing through because people might be changing their minds.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the states still had their choices because they still hold their sovereignty over this of the inside of the state. So if some states choose not to legislate for this, then it wasn't effective there because Congress didn't have power. It says up here that it's a manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the import. So
No, see, it's also the sale within. So this covered all territory, I think. So, Christian. I mean that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. If I want to make you, did you get were you able to make your point?
who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read a few Supreme Court rulings about this, and it's specifically about it was the importation, and there were cases where liquor was coming overseas through boats, and they were trying to sneak it in, and whether it was because it arrived in a state and who had jurisdiction, and the feds ended up not having jurisdiction in some portions, and other portions it was strictly a state thing.
Okay.
So, and it was whether the state had legislated to make it illegal or not.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right.
I used to make my own homemade beer back in the 70s, and you can legally make up to 200 gallons per year without having to pay federal tax on your product. So we used to have a lot of good parties in the boarding house that I lived in. I'd make it 10% often, and they started calling it rocket beer because it would really get you up fast.
Thank you, Howard.
Sure.
All right. So now I'm going to go to Teresa and ask you to read this entire. Oh, are you ready?
Yeah.
Number
Number
9. Here you go.
19. Okay. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.
Good. You got the right to vote. And again, what this does is expands the political population to, and what it does do is tend to break apart any existing power structure, whether that's good or bad. I knew a lady here, she's since passed away, but she was in our Constitution Study Group. She was actually a diehard teachers union person. And she said, the whole country started to go downhill since we passed the 19th Amendment. As soon as they gave women the right to vote, it all went horrible. So,
Well, women actually were voting before this, so it was actually.
In some states.
yes, in some
Yeah.
states, exactly right. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Wyoming, notably. All right, so these were the progressive amendments. And I think we have come exactly upon 5 o'clock, and it is,
Wow.
that's that.
Awesome, John.
We've gone where we wanted to go on this thing. Thank you very much. Anybody have any final comments about progressivism, about the election? Are there progressives in this election? I don't know, anything you want.
My comment is I never fully, I wasn't as versed as you, I think most of you guys in all this stuff before I started this course. But that 16th Amendment, that just seems so pivotal as a turning point. I mean, I'm like, what? I'm like getting it, like, oh my God, I never, there's got to be a lot of stories behind all that because
Yeah,
that's
there is.
pivotal, so pivotal from the original country and the free people.
I agree.
Yes, totally right. It also gave the federal government power, more money, so that it could bribe the states to do its bidding, and also to be able to support these horrible, huge wars, World War One, World War Two, and I could go on, but I won't.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you,
Yeah.
Howard. All right,
Yeah.
Christian, any comment?
No, I was trying to think of the best explanation of the 16th Amendment, but it's in it's in a book that Congress publishes every year. It's called The Constitution of the United States of America: An Analysis and Interpretation.
Uh-huh.
Every 12 years they republish a new version of it, and it's actually law. It's public law, something or other. Anyways, I have like 5 copies of it. I get one I find them on eBay.
Ah, okay.
Because I bought one through U.S. Publishing Office. It cost me $202 for it. So I find them on eBay for about $35-40 sometimes. But
Wow.
anyways, these are great. What you're going through. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is one
Oh
of
my God.
wow.
the.
Yeah, that's the abridged version, I think.
What's that?
I think that's the abridged version.
Yeah, this is the 2002 version.
Uh-huh.
I gave John a link to the online version, which is great, and I have it on my cell phone.
Yeah.
So it's quite detailed on every aspect of the Constitution. So
What I find real interesting is how the Constitution and the amendments and everything were all very short and precise. And now you got volumes and volumes and everything's really humongous and long.
Yeah.
well, it's generally about they're so long because the courts have made so many rulings regarding certain aspects of it, and the federal appellate courts and the U.S. Supreme Court are the only ones who can really allow to interpret it. So over time, they continue to get taken up with new kind of quasi subjects, you could say.
Yeah.
Fashionable opinions.
Yeah,
Some,
exactly.
some of it is that, and one day we may talk a little bit more about legal realism and the problem with the courts, quote, interpreting.
Yep.
But that is, but at any rate, I think we're done with this meeting unless anybody else has anything else to say about it.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
I have one more comment.
Okay.
I would like to ditto my comment from before in relationship to that thing about the senators and the change.
Yeah.
I never none of that. I knew nothing about that. And so you calling these the progressive amendments, I get it. And I listen, and I listen to Glenn Beck on the radio when I'm in the car in the morning.
Okay.
And he comes up with all kinds of stuff. And many, many times he has traced things back to the progressive era and to what the time period you're talking about. And I'll listen and I'll be like, okay, and I get some of it, but now I'm getting it much more crystal clear.
Good.
And now I know what he's talking about. I never realized these things. So
All right.
thank you. I mean, this has been very enlightening and
Great.
I'm
somewhat
glad,
dismaying.
I'm glad we could help. Glad we could help.
One more comment. One more.
One more, Howard.
Progressive is a misnomer because it's got like the idea of progress in it.
Yeah.
So it's another way these people on the left and the authoritarians and totalitarians usurp the word liberal and liberalism to mean greater power for the government. But its original meaning was libertas, freedom. So
Right.
anyway, they sort of ran out of liberals became a bad word But your classical liberal
Yeah.
is today's conservative. So
All right.
Yeah.
all
They
I'm
like to
going to say.
change words like meanings like in the income tax.
Yeah, it makes it harder for people to understand and more confusing. So you blow the stable datums that people have,
And you
and
blow-
Yeah.
then you can put in your own definition, again, to control and manipulate people's minds.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else have anything to say? Because I'm about to end this thing.
Can I throw
I
one
like
quick
your
thing out?
haircut, Marty.
Can I
I
throw
like your
one quick thing out, John?
Thank you.
Okay, what's that, Kevin?
Can I throw one quick thing out?
Yeah, what?
The election this week, and, you know, it can conceivably say go to the opposite party, Joe Biden and the Democrat Party.
Okay,
And the government on the federal level to change like that so drastically over in one day, that's just a testament to this Constitution that we're studying and truly the greatness of this country. Because I mean, it's basically it's a change of government. It's almost like a revolution, but by the peaceful will of the people. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
thank you very much. And I think with that, I'm going to end it. Nice ending. Thank you, Kevin, for
Thank
taking
you.
us out. Talk to you all later. See you next
Bye.
week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.